Okay, so the Nintendo Switch 2 has actually been out for quite some time now, but I want to talk about it again because it's one of the few and only pieces of tech, I think, where I've gone from absolutely hating on it to being completely enamored by it, which is what I am now. Now, previously I did sort of touch on this in the past, but I literally tried to return this thing since I honestly just wasn't really vibing with it, and Mario Kart really wasn't my game, and I'll sort of talk about that. It turns out I do flippin' love Mario Kart, but I've sort of just grown to love this console as time has gone on. Now, that isn't to say the Switch 2 is perfect by any means, since it's definitely not, but I can say where I'm at specifically in my point of life right now, the system sort of ends up being more valuable to myself than it would typically be based off of just the spec sheet alone. Now, my exposure to the whole Switch lineup, I'm not new to it entirely, but I did have the Nintendo Switch 2, which I also didn't really get down with. I'd say probably for different reasons. So I can say going into the Switch 2, my expectations were already pretty low. Likewise, I can say I'm extremely fortunate because I have an insanely beast gaming PC. I've got the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X, yet I find myself playing on my Nintendo Switch 2 more than all of those combined at this time. Now, as for why this thing's just a little bit more special to me specifically, and it's kind of corny to be honest, but it's because I'm living that dad life now, if I'm completely honest, and I simply just don't have a lot of time to game. And where the Switch 2 has come in for me with my such limited time is that it's made gaming so much more accessible, and gaming really truly is my absolute bar none favorite thing to do to decompress at the end of a long day. So the fact that I can sort of get a little bit more using the Switch 2 means a lot. Now, even more so, how it came a little bit more special to me over the last month was that I actually started traveling a little bit more, and I don't really travel usually, to be honest, but I was actually using this while I was on the go for the first time, and needless to say, it was sort of one of those moments where I was just like, okay, damn, I kind of actually get it now. In my scenario, I had the chance to start Pokemon ZA at the airport, and I can say I was lucky enough to play that while traveling the entire time. And mind you, I had no idea that that game was as different as it was. I thought it was supposed to be what I guess Wind and Waves are, a traditional Pokemon game, but it's not. It's actually sort of a successor to Pokemon Arceus, and the gameplay was just surprising. I wasn't expecting that. Needless to say, though, that was a great time either way. And again, I sort of talked about how Mario Kart was straight up booty cheeks for myself. I just didn't enjoy it. But I actually love that game now, mainly because, again, it kind of sounds corny, but I play a lot of Switch games with my kids, and it's just something that has an irrational amount of value to myself. And again, maybe having 10 or 15 minutes here or there to actually play games, whether I'm in bed, walking on a flipping treadmill, whatever else, I actually can just dive into gaming whenever and wherever. And the weird thing is, so far the hardest part about owning this console is kind of just literally deciding what to play in the first place. I can say that is an incredible problem to have. Now, realistically, I can say there's not much I personally don't like about the system, but to sort of get one of the things out of the way, and that's definitely going to be the battery. The reason why I didn't originally sort of dive into the battery all too much is because my exposure to the Switch 2 was totally different. Again, I was primarily sitting here at home. If I'm vibing out at my desk, I prop it up and play for a bit. If I'm laying in bed or on the couch and I'm playing my Switch, whenever I'd be done, I can just plop it back on the dock and it's going to be topped up pretty much at all times. So I didn't really see how the battery actually performed, I should say. But man, when I'm on the road playing Cyberpunk or Hogwarts Legacy, that battery absolutely gets chunked, I can say. So whereas before I didn't really have to think about the battery at all, I almost have to be conscious of the battery when using this system. And that's just something that was a bit surprising, actually. Either way, when it comes to charging, at least one of the benefits, apart from the dock, of course, is that there are two Type-C ports. I do appreciate there's one on the top and the bottom. Everybody plays a little bit different, whether it's on their lap or up right in front of their face. So these two ports was great when it comes down to actually charging it. Now, quickly, I do want to give a huge thanks to Anker for sponsoring a portion of today's video. I did spend last week traveling for some YouTube events, and I've been using their newest flagship lineup while on the go, the Anker Prime series. This is easily their most advanced fast charging gear yet, and it really does help keep the bulk down while traveling, especially compared to a traditional massive charging brick. The first thing's got to be the Anker Prime power bank, which has a wild industry-leading 300-watt multi-port output. A single one of these USB-C ports can deliver a massive 140 watts fast charging, meaning I can charge both my M5 MacBook Pro alongside my iPad at the same time, or even two MacBooks without worrying about any sort of charging slowdowns. Even compared to the already beastly last gen as well, this is 17% smaller, making it perfect for travel, and luckily it is also TSA approved, so there's no gate or onboarding anxieties. Using dual port fast recharging with the two USB-C ports, you can actually recharge this in up to 50% in as fast as 13 minutes, so even if time is tight, you're still covered for any sort of power. It also features a smart display display, so you can monitor real-time wattages and charging info at a glance. Now, whether I'm indoors or traveling, the Prime 160 charger covers everything I need in this case as well. It is the world's most compact 160 watt multi-port charger. It does deliver 160 watts max total output, and a single USB-C port can deliver up to 140 watts. Thanks to Anker's Power IQ 5.0 for intelligent dynamic power distribution, this charger delivers the same efficiency as 3 separate original Apple chargers, but in a travel-friendly design, nearly the same size as a pair of earbuds. This also includes that smart display where you can gently tap the button to switch between multiple interfaces like your total output, a detailed per port output, your temperature, and of course the charging mode. Pair the charger with the power bank and you've got a complete portable fast charging setup. Be sure to check the link down below to learn more, and thanks again to Anker for sponsoring a portion of today's video. Now, to sort of dive into the gaming side of things a little bit more, and it's something that actually kind of surprised me. Not the fact that it games. Naturally, of course, it's going to flip and game, but it's how many games there are available specifically for the Switch 2. If we're thinking about something like the PlayStation 5, there was remake after remake after remake, which is fine. I played some of those remakes on my PlayStation 5 and stuff, but it took them forever to sort of launch these console-specific games for the PS5 or even the Series X and all that. And I find it's been less than a year, and there's actually a good amount of native Switch and Nintendo game titles alongside some of these wild AAA ports. So the amount of games on the Switch 2 was just surprising. When it comes down to my experience in the past, again, with the Switch OLED, I never really played much on there because really, honestly, the only game I really played on there was Pokemon Arceus. And again, that's probably maybe the reason I didn't like my Switch OLED all too much is because I was just playing those Pokemon games. But the Switch 2 is a whole different ballgame when it comes down to the games. Now, I'm still only a couple hours into Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is an incredibly fun game, mind you, which is probably an ongoing trend you're going to hear me say, is that a lot of these games are just fun. And those fun games still actually look really good, which is pretty awesome. And then you still have the even more graphically intense games like Cyberpunk that really honestly have no business looking as good as they are on a handheld, which, mind you, still performs even better when you put it into the dock. And it sort of surprised me that if the Switch 2 looks this good, I can't even imagine any of those PC handhelds I haven't used yet, like the ROG Ally or the flippin' Steam Deck that apparently is sold out still because of RAM and SSD shortages. If the Switch 2 looks this good, I can't imagine those. And I did briefly sort of talk about how I didn't really like Mario Kart from the get-go, but as I started playing that game a little bit more with my kids, I realized how much fun this game actually is. Before, I sort of just played Mario Kart by myself, which, funny enough, again, I sort of like it now. But yeah, I hated it on launch, and what sort of was the catalyst to making me sort of been like, oh shit, this thing's actually pretty good, was when my wife bought me Cyberpunk 2077. And once I sort of booted that up, I was just like, damn, this thing is actually pretty sick. And when I spoke about this console in my original review, I sort of asked you guys for recommendations on what games I should really play. And the amount of times you guys told me to play Breath of the Wild, I still haven't, by the way, because I already have a backlog to get through. But is it that really flipping good? Like, you guys really said play Breath of the Wild. I've never even played a Zelda game. Don't come at me. Even on the N64, I never touched it. I'll get there. Thank you guys for the recommendations, the 400 of them. I'll get there. Regardless, though, I can say I'm beyond impressed with how well the Switch 2 has performed overall. It could be optimization, it could be the actual hardwares, it could be the games, whatever. I just wasn't really expecting this, and my only issue, again, so far, is just choosing which game to play in the first place. The cool thing as well is I had only recently just sort of rediscovered Fortnite, and I was able to play that while on the go on the Switch 2. I can see why it's so flippin' addicting for these 10-year-olds. That game is actually a good time. But that game actually ran incredibly on the Switch, and I was even able to dunk on these 8-year-olds while I was at the airport, and it felt like this game was running at like 100 plus FPS. I'm not sure exactly what the frames per second were on there, but it performed incredibly well. Again, a sort of another surprising thing for me in that case. Where the Switch 2 would typically be my little console for just my offline games, it's actually performing well for these online games like Fortnite, and even Overwatch I think is coming out with a Switch 2 updated version in the next 2 months. And if anybody knows, Overwatch is my jam. I used to be top 500 North America, so to try and play Overwatch on here, I'm really stoked to give that a go. And again, that sort of leans into just the availability of games on here. You have your fun offline games, and then you have all these amazing online games, which I'm looking forward to trying out. As for the build and design of the system though, I actually dig it quite a bit, although I can say there is a little bit of give to the Joy-Cons when they are attached to the system. If I recall, I read something that give is there for a reason. I can't remember. But overall, they did do a pretty good job here, and I do dig the matte black design across the entire body, especially with the sort of Joy-Con accents on here. Going only thing I'm missing with my, I guess, physical experience with this console is a Pro Controller, which 1,000 people told me to buy one of those as well. I haven't quite gotten there, but it is on my radar still. But when it comes down to the actual Joy-Cons themselves, I can say I actually love them a lot more than the original Switch OLED that I had, mainly because they're a hell of a lot bigger. For myself, I got these meaty mittens here, so having the larger Joy-Cons to hold on to is something that I've just sort of grown to appreciate. The only thing that I don't like with the Joy-Cons, I like the Joy-Cons themselves, but man, the sticks on there are loose and flappy. I don't even know how to describe them. They're just, the joysticks themselves are not good. I would have loved to see some sort of Hall effect or something on these Joy-Cons, but they still feel toyish and that they could break at any moment, which is probably my biggest gripe on this entire system. Specifically, outside of the Joy-Cons and the sticks themselves, I can say this system as a whole feels very well built, and I didn't even sort of carry with a case. I just sort of plopped it in my backpack while traveling, and it turned out okay. And as I've said, since I am a tired-ass dad with such limited time, I have to say one of my favorite things is the fact that I can just split these Joy-Cons off the holder and do something like walking, as simple and as niche as that is, because it allows me to sort of keep a natural balance and cadence with my hands while walking on a pad, and I can still game, of course, which overall is pretty awesome. Just stacking those habits for how I get it done. Also, I can say they actually did a pretty good job with the built-in speakers on this console. It's just one of those things that I didn't really use before all too much until I started traveling with the Switch, so I've just sort of grown to appreciate it. I can say as well, even in incredibly bright environments, the screen actually did pretty damn well, and I didn't really feel the need to have more brightness. And again, coming down to some of those games like Fortnite, I really do dig that higher refresh rate. It came in clutch while gaming. And while I'm not entirely sure which games support HDR and stuff, it is on by default, I think, in the settings. And I can say, honestly, most of the games I played simply looked beautiful. And then there will be the games like Cyberpunk or Hogwarts Legacy where you know they have HDR support, and these really do lean into that HDR aspect, and it does look flippin' awesome. So they did a good job here with the HDR optimization. And one of the things I love too is that they just let you pair Bluetooth stuff on here. It's a simple thing that you would think every gaming console handheld would do, but like my PlayStation Portal only lets me use a native pair of Pulse earbuds from PlayStation themselves, but I'm just happy the Switch let me either use my AirPods. I was using some Pixel Buds while traveling, as well as my Nothing headphones. They worked really well. So something as simple as Bluetooth, just awesome. Now those are my sort of basic thoughts about the console, but I want to talk more specific to myself, the things I love, the things I hate about it. And one of the things that is a no-brainer for most people, frankly, but it's the fact that it's flippin' portable. I can literally take this thing with me almost anywhere and everywhere and still get a few minutes of gaming, whether that's, you know, a short session, a long session, it doesn't matter. I just love that, since this is one of the best handheld experiences I ever had. Even though I haven't really had a chance to play those handheld PCs yet, it is a damn good overall experience. Likewise, to sort of go a little bit further beyond that, is all the different ways you can actually play this thing. Like, I can hold this thing in my hand like any other person would. I could be vibing out on the couch or in my bed, or even if I'm just doing some sort of work or researching or just watching something at my desk, whatever. I can just prop this thing up on my desk and still play completely, and I just love that. And separately from that, of course, at any point I can just plop it into my dock. I can play on my TV, I can play on my monitor, I can play on a projector, and at a moment's notice I can just pluck it out of the dock and away I go, which is absolutely bonkers. And the crazy thing is that all at the same time is I don't need all of that. I don't need the projector, the monitor, the TV. The whole package right out of box is just still plug and play. Like, I can play this thing handheld and have an uncompromising experience. And I've sort of talked about this when it comes down to consoles in general, not just the Switch. It's why I've been using consoles more recently versus my gaming PC. But it's just because you can have this thing in your desk setup and you really get your own space, your own solace. You can just vibe out and sort of deep dive into whatever game you want to play. And then of course there's a scenario where you can take that same console, in this case the Switch 2, I can put it on the dock in my living room or projector, and suddenly I'm playing with all my friends and family in the same room, and you have this awesome experience like the good old days when people would actually get together and play in the same room. Flippin' love that. That's all the good stuff though. What about the bad stuff I mentioned? And of course I already mentioned the battery. Not good. I can say it just gets chunked depending on the game I'm playing. And those joy sticks on the Joy-Cons. Joy-Cons are great. The sticks are straight ass. Those need to be fixed. That might be a me thing. I could probably just pick up a Pro Controller, but now I gotta buy a Pro Controller, right? But some of the newer things I don't like about this is just the overall expense of this system. Relative to other consoles and PC parts and whatever, I'm not gonna get into that all too much. It is relatively affordable, but once you start looking at, you know, the subscription services, the cost of the games, the cost of the controllers, the cost of the docks, All of that's pretty flippin' expensive, man, and I still haven't bought a second dock for my living room just because it's so bloody expensive. Now, talking about the expense of the games, this is where it's either going to be rationalization or me coping, but the games are flippin' expensive. The way I look at it, though, is I can spend 30, 40 bucks to go see a movie in the theaters. Maybe the movie's 2 hours long, so it's like 15, 20 bucks an hour worth of entertainment. My coping strategy is that if I buy a $90 game, 90 bucks Canadian, that is going to give me way more than 2 hours of entertainment, probably in the dozens or hundreds depending on the game, really. And I'd say that's pretty well worth it. Yeah, the games are getting more expensive, especially when you look at the online services, the games themselves, the consoles, everything in between is just getting more expensive. But so far I find gaming is still one of the more affordable hobbies. That's going to depend on who you are, of course. But yeah, call it coping or rationalization, whatever. The next thing that I don't like about the Switch, and I sort of talked about this briefly in my original review, is that it doesn't really do anything outside of gaming. Now, this is a double-edged sword because I love using consoles for their simplicity. I love that they just game, or maybe they'll just do music and video on the screen. I like the consoles because I'm not alt-tabbing, I'm not checking emails, I'm not doing all this other crap. I just watch my show, watch my movie, play my game on the console. But the Switch 2 doesn't have any of those other apps that I would want, like YouTube or Netflix. I would just love to see that. Maybe we'll see it in an update. I could just imagine myself vibing out on my bed with the Switch 2 and watching some stuff. It would be pretty awesome. But yeah, honestly, before I ramble on too much, as somebody with very little time who still has an absolute passion for gaming, I'm just really enamored and enjoying this console. I can say I've also sort of developed as a tech head, as a gamer, as a person in general, and I'm not really chasing specs anymore as I once have. I have my beast-ass PC that does 4K at 240 hertz with all the frames, with ultra settings, high settings, whatever the case is. Yet, again, I find myself gravitating to playing my Switch 2 more than those systems. This thing is worse than my PS5, it's worse than my Xbox, yet the allure of its accessibility, of the fun-ass games, and the overall experience just has me playing this thing more than all those systems. And how corny is it that I can say that it's almost magical to be able to sit down and play Mario Kart or Donkey Kong or really any of the Pokemon games with my kids, and at the same time, those games are fun for both them as well as myself, which is awesome. And whenever I do want to absolutely clap these 8-year-olds in Fortnite, I can still do that too and get my competitive fix for online games, and I really dig that. When I was a kid, at least, I didn't really care about graphics all too much, or maybe I did and all the graphics looked the same, incredible back then, but I was just primarily focusing on the actual gaming experience, and the Switch 2 sort of pulls me back into that, where I'm really just focusing on the gaming experience. Yeah, all the games still look flippin' amazing and super impressive, like Hogwarts and Cyberpunk and even Donkey Kong Bonanza. They look awesome, but they're really flippin' just a good time. This thing does help me slow down and keep my passion for gaming alive. It allows me to game in the first place and decompress, and it's just helping me spend quality time with my wife and kids. And I just love this system, as corny as that sounds. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about the Switch 2. Am I just fanboying over this thing, or is it actually that awesome? Thank you again. I will get to Breath of the Wild, I promise. It's just a matter of time. I appreciate you guys watching till the end. Till next time.